We have Pablo and Brian coming on. Pablo is a driver who has, kind of took a look at the law, read the law. It's very important what we talked about when it came to reading law, understanding different things. And, something happened over the last 18 months that you had figured out. So, Pablo, thank you for coming on. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you guys?
Great.
Great.
And then also the person who broke the story, Brian, coming from the LA Times. Hello, thank you for coming on.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me. And
All right.
congrats to you both. What an achievement here. It's so nice to see it reverberating out already. I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself here maybe, but yeah, congrats are in order, certainly.
Let's talk about a brief explanation of what Prop 22 is, kind of why Prop 22 came about in California, and then how has it affected California drivers prior to this whole adjustment change?
All right, I'll take that one, and then the rest is Pablo's. So Prop 22 was pushed by all the gig companies in California at the last national elections in 2020. It was replacing something called AB 5, which became the law of the land for about 9 months, for those 9 months, all these gig companies obviously pretty much ignored the law. And AB 5 basically codified everybody as employees, everybody meaning all the gig workers of all these companies. And then they wrote their own law with their $220 million support, pushed it through the national elections. It was the most expensive proposition in the history of the country, actually. And they passed it. So what Prop 22 does is it has two kind of, it gives some benefits to certain drivers. It all depends on how many hours you're driving per week. And all of this is on active time. So I want you to understand, whoever's watching or going to watch it later, active time meaning with a passenger in the back seat, meaning from the time you accept the trip or request to the time to drop off. Now, this is valid for rideshare. This is valid for food delivery, last mile delivery, and Prop 22, basically all these gig companies. So let's go with Uber, Lyft on rideshare, Uber Eats, Doordash, Grubhub, Instacart, Amazon Flex, Target Shipped, Walmart Spark, all these companies fall under Prop 22. So Prop 22 has two parts of it, main parts of it, which is it's guarantees basically for active hours that you're driving, your city's minimum wage at 120% clip. So in LA County, where I'm at, that number is $15.20. 120% of that puts us at $19.20. Plus, there was this mileage or maintenance adjustment added to Prop 22 for drivers, which for 2020 was at 30 cents per mile, active mile. Again, you have to really pay attention to active mile. And what happened is, Prop 22 was the law of the land. These companies, wrote the law, and April 13th of this year came around and Pablo stepped in, and there you go. That's what Prop 22 is. Now, there's other things in Prop 22, but only about 8 to 9% of drivers, rideshare drivers, get that benefit. It's a healthcare stipend, but that's not the issue we're going to discuss today. The issue we're going to mostly focus on today is going to be that 30-cent additional maintenance or mileage adjustment that Prop 22 had.
And so you already talked about the earnings guarantee, which is good. So it kind of set that up, and then this mileage adjustment. So what is the adjustment that was made?
Well, the adjustment what happened is that the adjustment, the way the law was written, there had to be an adjustment made to that 30 cents a mile starting January of 2022. And it had to be figured out by the California Treasurer's Office and published by them so that these gig companies start paying the adjusted figure. And it wasn't done. So all of 22 went by. It wasn't done. Then 23 came around under the law. They had to do another adjustment. Now, this adjustment was done with the CPIU rate. CPIU is Consumer Price Index of the country. And the treasurer had to do this again in January of 2023, which they did not do. So when obviously Pablo got in touch with me, like all of this started with a simple, innocent text from him to me on April 13th of this year. And he texted me, something, and then we have the screenshots, obviously. I did not know anything about this. The other thing is Pablo is a very successful rideshare driver. Most rideshare drivers, due to the fact that they make more than the minimum wage, may not be receiving this mileage adjustment. However, if you're, we call them ants, lovely ants. If you're a super ant and accept every rideshare trip, you most likely are going to receive this adjustment as well. But this is mostly for all the delivery drivers. And we know according to Pew Research, there are about 1.3 to 1.4 million gig workers in California. So it's a huge market. And so Pablo texted me this, and then we started digging. So now you can take over, bud.
Yeah. So Pablo, let's hold on. Pablo, let's go back to that. Sergio had said April 13th with a text. Before that, what were you even looking at? Were you understanding, curious, going back into what the law said, or what was going on that kind of got you into trying to figure this out and see, why didn't this happen in 2022 and 2023?
Well, I read the law before, or the ballot proposition before the election in November 2020. So I was familiar with most of the text. Obviously, with time, I can remember every single detail. So in the back of my mind, I always knew that, the adjustment was never made from January 2022. So that was already in the back of my mind. But who was I going to tell? I really didn't do anything with that information. And, primarily because it didn't really affect me. That money, I wasn't gonna get any adjustment. I've never received any Proposition 22 adjustment through the whole time the law has been in effect. I don't blame Sergio for getting this detail, because April 13th wasn't the first time I had mentioned it to him. We actually met for dinner on the day that the appeals court had ruled the law constitutional. And I don't blame Sergio for not forgetting this detail, because I tell people a lot of different things and people just ignore me. So I know I dropped this little tidbit of information about this proposition, and I remember clearly that his head was spinning about the money. But obviously it was something that was just in passing. It was towards the end of our first meeting in person. And weeks went on and nothing had happened. I really didn't touch base with Sergio on this subject again since that moment, so I don't blame him for not remembering. But then April 13th did come along, and that's when I was talking to him, brought it back up to his attention, and we started texting. And that's the day I decided to, let me just call the treasurer's office and see what happens.
Right. So for everybody who is watching this, I know the screenshots are going to fly around quickly, because we want to get to Brian. Is that actually on the RideShare Guy website, we just published the article in chronological order with all the screenshots, all the proof that we had. So please go read that. It'll show you everything that you may miss today. So yeah, Pablo is correct. I had known Pablo for about a year before then. We met through social media, Twitter, and he was probably watching me on YouTube or whatever not, or reading articles. And, I was at a Roth conference in Laguna Niguel. On my way back, I said, Pablo's halfway there, so might as well meet for dinner. And that's how we met. And he nudged me on April 13th. And I was super curious about it. And we started digging, as we should, right? I mean, look, man, information, education is power. And you need to dig into things sometimes. Even if they're not worth it. And as my Tuesday partner in crime, Chris, knows, I like digging. I'm like a little pit bull. I like digging a lot. And once in a while I catch a bone, and this was a pretty big bone. But anyway, long story short, he texted me, and then, we talked. And, we thought, well, why don't we call, the person who was supposed to make this adjustment, which was the California treasurer. And sure enough, he called the California treasurer, and here's his screenshot, April 13th at 2:03 p.m. And the conversation lasted about 13 minutes. And that is the California Treasurer's Office number. So if you guys want to call them up, that's it right there, the 916 number. And so initially, the person who answered the phone had absolutely no idea what Pablo was talking about. Absolutely none. And then I'll have him fill in the rest of the story. But Pablo actually had to, reel her back in because she kept sending Pablo to the IRS website for the 65.5 cent standard mileage deduction, which was like, okay, these people no clue what's going on here. So
yeah, so I was talking to, I'm assuming I don't know what the politically correct term, secretary, office assistant, I don't know what you call them now. She answered the phone, and I asked her about this adjustment, and she did immediately direct me to the IRS website for the 60 whatever odd cents deduction that independent contractors get. And I had to clarify that no, that wasn't what I was calling about, and I was actually calling about the Prop 22 stipulation that said that the treasurer had to publish every year an inflation adjustment on the engaged mile part of the law. So she puts me on hold, and took a little, couple minutes. She comes back on, and she still wasn't, I don't know exactly what you're talking about. So I referenced the business and professions code where this law is codified. I gave them the actual chapter number or article, whatever it's called, and subparagraph. And she puts me on hold again. And then when she comes back, she acknowledged that yes, indeed, it was something that the treasurer had to take care of, and that it would be coming out shortly. And that was it. And immediately we were texting with Sergio, but then we followed up with some phone conversations, and that was that. So that was April 13th, and you can see along with the history of the text messages. On May 4th, that's when I tweeted at Fiona Ma, the treasurer of California, because I seen there was no action from that phone call, and I wanted to know what was going on.
Yeah,
and
so with us is like, when in doubt, go to social media these days, right?
Yeah.
And so Pablo tweeted this out directly to the California Treasurer's Office. I chimed in a little bit. In fact, Brian's I tagged Brian. He's the second one up there, and we were just going back and forth on Twitter, and a couple of people said, "Does Ma's office even realize they have this responsibility?" Well, they did then, on April 13th, right? The only thing that I came across, in that conversation that was interesting to me was, their excuse of not publishing this, the California Treasurer's Office excuse was that Prop 22 was in litigation, meaning, a judge, a lower court judge, assumed or deemed that Prop 22 was unconstitutional in August of 2021. So the California Treasurer's Office figured, well, it's in litigation. Well, we did our due diligence and we got legal opinions, and unequivocally, all of them said, no, it's not in litigation. It's being appealed. The Prop 22 is still the law of the land. And I'm like, okay, then we need to, now we have a story. Now we have a story. And then I'm doing these back of the envelope calculations. This could be like millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. So I'm going, okay, now we need to dig deeper. I followed up actually with another call to the California Treasurer's Office before this tweet, and they said the same thing to me. It's under litigation. We're not going to publish until litigation is over. Well, litigation was over, because litigation was, according to them, so-called litigation was over when the appellate court ruled that Prop 22 was constitutional on March 15th, which was the day I met Pablo for dinner, which before all this started. So I'm like, why are you waiting until May 4th when we're tweeting now a month and a half later to publish? You should have done it on March 16th, right? Well, they didn't. So, we heard this quite a bit. Like, if we didn't figure this out, how long would this have gone? I don't know. Probably it would have gone another year. But fast forward, May 10th comes around, and to our surprise, Fiona Ma, and here it is, and then Fiona Ma tweeted out by tagging Pablo saying that, well, here it is. We made the adjustment, and go to our website. And sure enough, even today, when you go to the California Treasurer's website, that circled box up there is the adjustment. Explains what it is, how many cents it's going to go up for 2022 and 2023. And there's the tweet from Fiona Ma, the Treasurer of California, to Pablo, saying that, and in fact, on that part of it on the bottom, it says "spread the news." I'm like, you're a public office. Don't you think you should do like some sort of public announcement, because we're dealing with almost 1.5 million gig workers here? And we said, okay, great. So here we are. We have the adjustment, right? Well, now I'm thinking this is not national. It's a California story, but it's pretty major. So what do? I go, okay, I package all this up. And because now I'm concerned that, getting this adjustment published is one thing. Getting the gig companies to pay is a different story altogether, because I've been dealing with them since 2015. They're pretty stingy. They don't usually pay that fast. So we get in touch. What do I do? Good friend Brian, which published one of our other. In about a month ago, he had done an article on algorithmic wage discrimination, and he had used some of our videos and screenshots for that as well. So I'm going like, well, we're going there. I package it all up. I go, send him the email. I go, here it is, Brian. It's in your lap now. And then, obviously had to do his due diligence, and then the rest is history. But so, Brian, again, thank you so much for amplifying our voice. We did some of the work. You did a lot of the work as well. Obviously had to do your due diligence, call the treasurer's office, call these companies. So how did that go on your end?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an interesting story. I mean, to me, it's like it is a story. Well, it's a story about, once again, I see so many of these stories where if, drivers, want to get a benefit or a right or something that's entitled to them, then so often just the way that the nature of gig work, as precarious and sort of informal as it can be, the obligation often falls to drivers to make it happen themselves. You know that as well as anybody. So it's this story. I mean, it's whether that's sort of organizing at large, something like Gig Workers Rising or Rideshare Drivers United, or it's you guys at RideShare Guy kind of really digging into the data, or individual drivers finding things and raising the alarm. It's just so often just the response, more than any other sector, right? More than at most, at least even in sort of service work or other part-time jobs, there are more protocols, and there are laws governing it that have been better established. There's things that are better understood, and groups that can help. It's still kind of, I mean, I know it's 10 years old, but it's still the Wild West era. So I mean, I totally, if you guys hadn't noticed this, I don't know that anybody would have. And again, they're kind of banking on it. And the other thing that I started thinking about after seeing it there is like, why do they even, I think they're kicking themselves now, because they realize that if they hadn't, added this little caveat to the law that they wrote, they wouldn't be having to make this adjustment every year now that inflation's going up and up and up. But it's kind of, that's just par for the course. They're always experimenting with, well, how can we get away with a little bit there? Oh, that was too much. Now we got to increase the incentives again to get people back on the street. But how do we, we saw it when we talked about that last story with how they've kind of moved fares to sort of the upfront pricing, where now it's more opaque, and they can kind of take, in certain situations, more of a cut. So to me, it's a story that really shows both how, if gig workers want to get anything done, they got to do it themselves still. It's still so ill-formed in such a Wild West. And on the other side, it's a Prop 22 story, which I know there's a lot of different opinions about Prop 22 out there. But to me, having spoken with a lot of the drivers who kind of really did hope and work for it to get AB5 passed, so that they could have more protections, like real full-time drivers rather. I'm sympathetic to what Prop 22 has done, and what a mess of a law in a lot of ways. Like you said, it does some decent things, and it's not like it's a complete wash, but it is sort of written to be confusing and all over the place. Pablo knows, you read the whole damn thing, so you know what a mess it can be. And when I was talking to Vina, the law scholar who's cited in my piece, she's like, yeah, this is done by design. Like, the Treasury doesn't usually do things like this. They don't adjust for wages. Like, that's a weird thing to saddle the Treasury with. And in her opinion, Uber, whoever wrote the law between Uber and Doordash and all them, probably said, well, why don't we just shove this over there? We'll move it. Like, they distributed the different, responsibilities to different agencies to make it sort of harder to enforce and harder to, and then as you see what happens, it's been 18 months and drivers should have been getting this adjustment, this money all along. And it fell through the cracks. And I think, and I hope you talk about this more later in your show, but it's a good kind of indicator that we don't know exactly what else is falling through the cracks or how this is being administered. That every time a driver takes a ride, the rider pays a small fee that goes into this slush fund that is completely opaque. We don't know what the companies are doing with that slush fund it's a big war chest that's supposed to be for the healthcare subsidy. It's supposed to be for this vehicle mile earnings, but there's no transparency. We don't know what this fee is. We don't know how much Uber has collected. You could try to back of the envelope it and see, if you're given X million number of rides and they're taking $1 each time, it adds up to millions and millions of dollars.
Brian, as you know, we talked about this after the article came out. Me and Pablo have this feeling that this is like the tip of the iceberg, because I think after this, as convoluted as the law is, as opaque as the law is written, I think somebody has to look into this. A full audit of Prop 22, I think, is justified, to be honest with you. But that's what they do. They kick the ball to somebody and kick the can down the road. And I mean, I'm sure their lawyers were smart. They dumped it under the treasurer's lap. I'm like, hey, why not, right? And but I'm more interested in the bigger picture, which was just like Chris was showing the screenshots. Now, educating the drivers is one thing, right? I mean, I think we need to educate the consumer, because consumers are a much larger community than the drivers are. Okay, so these are some screenshots of what an Uber Eats receipt looks like on the consumer end, on the right side, and on the left side is one of my own rideshare drives or rides I have given. So in LA County, these are both from LA County. For each single time Uber or Lyft are doing a trip, the passenger pays 75 cents. As clearly with a line item, it's indicated that it says California driver benefits with 3 asterisks next to it. Okay. And on the right screenshot, we have an Uber Eats receipt where you guys can see the 4th line item, after subtotal tax service fee, is California driver benefits. That's 99 cents. So, while Brian correctly said the back of the envelope, well, here's the back of the envelope, Brian. Uber did 2.12 billion trips globally. Okay. This is in the last 3 months only. Now we're talking from 2020. That's when January 2020, when Prop 22 kicked in. Okay. So last 3 months, Uber, according to their earnings report, they did 2.1 billion trips. 27% of Uber's revenue or sales come from California, as it does with all other gig companies, because California is a massive market. If we just go with that 27%, on an average, 75 cents to $1 has been collected from close to 500 million trips in one single quarter. We're talking since 2020. This could be billions in dollars. It really could be. Now, I'm just talking Uber now. I'm not putting Lyft in there. I'm not putting Doordash, which has 65% of market share. On Doordash receipts, by the way, it shows between 99 cents, $1.50 for deliveries. So for rideshare, anywhere between 45 cents and 75 cents is collected, depending on what county you're in. Like in San Francisco, it's 55 cents. But on each single trip, each single delivery, this is charged to the consumer. I don't think the consumer even knows, because how many of us order food or take trips and look at their receipts? None of us do. I mean, really. So where is this money, right? I think
that's a great question.
That's a legitimate question, because, if these companies have all the data, which I'm assuming they do, right? And it's collected. Can you put the last screenshot one more time, Chris? The one with the 3 of them? Yeah. So the next to California driver benefits on the left screenshot, there are 3 asterisks. And the 3 asterisks, if you go to the explanation of what it is, clearly says right there, California driver benefits fee is payable by riders directly to Uber and not part of your driver earnings. Great. If it's directly paid by Uber, well, Uber should know how many of these 75 cents or dollars they have collected, because it's pretty simple math, right? Now, if you go back to 2020, this could be a lot of money. I mean, I'm certain it's going to be a lot of money. And now multiply that by Doordash and Lyft and Instacart and all these other companies which have passed on this Prop 22 driver benefits to the consumer. I think we need to look into this, and I'm obviously, we're going to work with Brian on this, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, right? Like, I mean, if they say the whole argument was like, no, like we want to keep drivers flexible. So instead of having Uber pay full healthcare, this is like your health. This is your half. If you drive 20 or 30 hours, and you get a subsidy, and we'll pay. But so how much of that is actually being paid out? Like, what percentage?
Yeah.
How do we know they're actually allocating the funding properly, and how do we know that they're the answer is we don't have any idea.
I have no idea. I have no idea, Brian. Honestly, I have no idea.
And within the on the healthcare subsidy part, there's so many people who, with the RideShare, you qualify for government, sponsored, healthcare, or if you work with somebody, your wife or your husband, who gets full benefits, well, then you have healthcare, and you are not going to see that healthcare subsidy. And it's specifically written where it has to be a California choice or, Obamacare sponsored healthcare. And if it doesn't qualify, then you get nothing. So there's a big percentage of drivers who are not going to get a subsidy for one reason or another. And it really shouldn't be that opaque. The law was written in a way, even with the engaged mile part. If you look at historical data from the last decade, 1% was the average. So if you look at that, there would be no adjustment if historical trends continued. So we wouldn't have this massive inflation spike. That we wouldn't have seen. The first, adjustment would have been 30 cents, 0.1, and it would just be estimated back downward to 30 cents. So we wouldn't even get to 31 cents if it would have been historical data. So it was written in a couple of ways. It was written, first of all, with historical data, thinking in their head, that, hey, it's not, what's the big deal? It's not going to be, more than 1%. We're never going to pay more than 30 cents. And then the other thing is, let's hide it into the treasurer's responsibility, where, hey, if she catches it, great. And if not, who cares, right? If you look at all the communications from Uber on Prop 22 and from Lyft and from Doordash prior to this adjustment, that adjustment was never mentioned. Yeah. Everything else, it breaks it down on how do you qualify for your health care, how do you qualify for the engaged mile, all that stuff. But it never said, hey, starting on 2022, or, it's going to be adjusted. That adjustment just came out of nowhere. Like, nobody knew about it. And hey, by the way, the treasurer screwed up, and here's your money. So, on Twitter, I see a lot of, the hate, or people that are citing on the gig companies. And trust me, I'm a capitalist, so I get the whole notion of like, hey, if I was running Uber and Lyft, I would try to maximize my profits. I understand that motivation. But when you have a history, especially with Uber, of constantly doing things, of stealing tips and getting sued and creating riots and fights with taxis in Paris, there's this constant, mantra with Uber of like always doing the wrong thing. And not until being pushed into doing the right thing do they do the right thing. So that's how I look at this whole picture. I hope that this puts a spotlight on this, and that we seriously talk to our politicians to fix this, right? Because it's not working the way it is, and I hope this story that Brian wrote opens that door to more scrutiny.
All right, thanks for watching. That short little clip was from our live stream, Show Me the Money Club with Sergio and myself, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Make sure you subscribe, turn on all notifications so you'll be notified when we go live, as well as all of our awesome content. Make sure to check out this video right here, which will take you to the entire live stream, or check out this video right there. All right, drive smart, everyone.